They appear as if from nowhere. Men in white cloaks, a red cross burning quietly on their chests. At first, only 9 knights, swearing an oath to guard the road to the Holy Land. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, they become a powerful order owners of fortresses. Gold, influence, and secrets, carefully hidden behind stone walls and sacred vows. They are not merely warriors. Where the strength of the sword ends, the power of knowledge begins. They speak with kings, tighten their grip around popes, vanish into the sands of Palestine, and whisper of the Grail as if it were something more than legend. They call themselves warriors of the light, march beneath the red cross under the name of God, and behind them remain the ashes of villages, prayers uttered beside burning stakes, and blood spilled upon altars. They say, "This is the will of heaven." But does holiness truly demand the smoke of burned libraries, the screams of those who refuse to bow before the sword? Is faith proven through destruction, or does it quietly wither there? And then, one day, everything collapses. Executions, accusations, curses whispered in courtrooms and cathedrals. Only one question continues to disturb historians and romantics alike. Who were they, really? Knights of God? Or terror wrapped in monastic robes? My dear friends, welcome to the official channel Lectures for Sleep. This is a place where dreams turn into knowledge, and a familiar voice guides you gently through the silence of the night. Tonight, together, we slowly untangle one of the most mysterious threads of history. We drift into an age of crusades, secret initiations, forbidden knowledge, and ancient legends. We learn who the Templars are, how they rise, why they fall, and which parts of their story belong to truth and which are born from fear. We follow the path of those who call themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, and we try to understand who they truly are. True guardians of holy places, or the executors of religious terror, burning and breaking in the name of the cross. Make yourself comfortable. Before you unfolds a story where light and darkness are woven so tightly together, perhaps even the knights themselves no longer know which side they serve. If you enjoy falling asleep to our videos, listening to this familiar voice with verified information and careful pronunciation, support our path. Subscribe to the channel, press the bell, and leave a few warm words in the comments. Your kindness is like a small flame in the quiet. It helps create new stories and continue telling them for you. And now, wrap yourself in a blanket. Rest your head on the pillow. Let the world remain outside. Close your eyes. The story begins. Unlike ordinary knights who fight for honor, glory, or land, the Templars are something more. They are warriors of God, yet they answer to no king. They are monks, yet they command some of the deadliest armies of the Middle Ages. They are sworn to poverty by rule, yet their hidden wealth stored in castles, vaults, and sacred sites continues to haunt the dreams of treasure seekers even today. But why do the Templars, above all other military orders, become symbols of mystery, conspiracy, and vanished relics? After all, the era knows many such orders. The Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights, the Order of St. Lazarus. And yet it is the Templars who remain in memory as guardians of the Grail, keepers of secret knowledge, and victims of a great betrayal. To understand where this legend is born, we must return to Europe at the beginning of the 11th century, a world where religion decides the fate of nations, and knights leave their homes to die for Jerusalem. It is the age of the Crusades, a war that creates both saints and monsters. And in this war, the Templars become both heroes and victims. By the end of the 11th century, Europe stands on the edge of great upheaval. Fragmented kingdoms live by war. Knighthood slowly transforms into a professional military elite, and the Catholic Church searches for ways to strengthen its authority. The power of the Pope grows, yet the Christian world is restless. The Holy Land remains under Muslim control, and many see this as unbearable. Everything changes when, in 1095, at the Council of Clermont, Pope Urban II delivers a speech that ignites one of the greatest movements of the medieval world. He declares that Muslims not only hold Jerusalem, but oppress Christians, desecrate holy places, and destroy churches. His words unleash a wave of religious fervor across Europe. But anger alone is not enough. Urban II offers something more. To all who journey to the Holy Land, their sins will be forgiven. This means that anyone knight, peasant, even criminal, can cleanse their soul and secure a place in heaven. The Pope's call comes at a moment when Europe is already ready. Feudal lords seek new lands. Knights seek war and purpose. Peasants seek escape from poverty. For many, the crusade becomes a chance to change their fate. And so, in 1096, the first columns of people who take up the cross begin moving east. It is a chaotic tide. Thousands of men, women, and children most, with no weapons and no experience. They are led by the fanatical preacher Peter the Hermit, who promises that God himself will lead them to victory. Reality proves merciless. This poorly armed and untrained mass, later known as the People's Crusade, never even reaches the Holy Land. They move through the Balkans, looting and destroying everything in their path. By the time they reach Byzantine borders, they become a problem even for the Christian emperor. And ahead lies disaster. In Asia Minor, they meet the Seljuk army, a disciplined and experienced force. In a series of battles, the crusading crowd is almost completely annihilated. Only small groups of survivors reach Constantinople, where the emperor quickly sends them onward, eager to rid himself of the burden. But behind them comes something different. In 1097, true armies assemble. Western European feudal forces, composed of trained and hardened warriors. These are men who understand that the journey to the Holy Land is not a pilgrimage, it is a military campaign. They bring discipline where there was chaos. They prepare for battle, forge alliances, and move with purpose. Among them are commanders like Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, seasoned leaders with ambition and personal stakes. As they march east, the Crusaders encounter an unfamiliar world. Asia Minor is controlled by the Seljuks, a powerful and organized force that once crushed the Byzantines at Manzikert. Yet the Crusaders are no less dangerous. They storm cities, cross hostile lands, endure disease, hunger, and burning heat, and continue onward. They move toward their goal, the Holy Land. This campaign, organized as a true military operation, marks the beginning of the Crusader presence in the East. They arrive not only as pilgrims, but as conquerors seeking not just to liberate holy sites, but to establish themselves in these lands. This is the first step toward the creation of Crusader states and the birth of the first military orders. Amid chaos, war, and religious fervor, ideas quietly take shape, ideas that, decades later, will give rise to the most famous knights of the Middle Ages, the Order of the Templars. After years of marching, endless battles, hunger, and loss, the Crusader army finally reaches its destination. They cross thousands of kilometers, survive Asia Minor, disease, and starvation. But all of this is merely a prelude to the ultimate trial, Jerusalem. The city is the final goal of the First Crusade. For many, its capture means the fulfillment of a vow made before God. Yet when the knights first see the walls of the holy city, reality strikes hard. Ahead lies one of the most brutal sieges of their lives. Jerusalem is under the control of the Egyptian Fatimids, a Muslim dynasty ruling from Cairo. The city is well fortified. Its walls appear unbreakable. The defenders know the Crusaders will not retreat, and they prepare to stand to the end. The Crusaders themselves suffer terribly. Heat, lack of water, and starvation turn their camp into torment. Men die not from swords, but from thirst and sickness. Yet retreat is impossible. Without siege engines, the assault is doomed. Wood is scarce. There are almost no trees around Jerusalem. Houses are dismantled, timber dragged from afar, heavy beams hauled under the scorching sun. At the same time, religious fervor intensifies. The warriors fast and pray. Then, barefoot, they march around the city, echoing the biblical story of Jericho, believing faith itself might bring down the walls. The assault begins on July 14th. For 2 days, the Crusaders attack desperately. The defenders repel them with relentless determination. Only at dawn on July 15th do the attackers finally break through. It is a moment of triumph and of horror. As the Crusaders pour into Jerusalem, a massacre begins. Years of suffering erupt without mercy. Streets fill with blood. Homes become traps for civilians. And in this moment where faith, violence, victory, and terror collide, the shadow that will one day give birth to the Templars grows longer and darker, quietly preparing to take form in the silence that follows. The chronicles describe scenes that make even the modern reader shudder. Swords barely have time to cool. Bodies are piled in heaps. Blood flows down the steps of the Temple Mount as if it were water after heavy rain. Inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, knights fall to their knees, their feet submerged in blood up to the ankles, and they thank God for victory. A victory gained through fire and steel, through suffering beyond measure. But what does this victory truly mean in the long silence of history? The Crusaders believe that Jerusalem will now belong to the Christian world forever. Yet the massacre they unleash does more than destroy the Muslim and Jewish population of the city. It forever brands the Crusaders, in the eyes of the East, as hated conquerors. In the Islamic world, the fall of Jerusalem becomes a symbol of Christian cruelty, and the idea of revenge for the holy city settles deeply into the consciousness of Muslim rulers, where it will remain for generations. From a military perspective, the Crusaders win. From a geopolitical one, they commit one of the greatest mistakes in history. Instead of seeking compromise or building alliances with local powers, they lay the foundation for wars that will last centuries. Their triumph becomes the beginning of their own catastrophe. And now a new question rises quietly from the ruins. How do they hold the Holy Land? The warriors who come to Jerusalem cannot remain there forever. Many already dream of returning home, carrying with them whatever spoils they manage to claim. But who will protect the city then? Who will hold power in this dangerous and hostile land? From this uncertainty, a new idea slowly takes shape. The idea of creating an elite brotherhood of warrior monks men who are not merely knights, but guardians of the Holy Land itself. Among the first of these men are those who will soon be called the Poor Knights of Christ, known to the world as the Templars. The danger surrounds the Crusaders from all sides. Muslim powers, the Seljuks in Syria and the Fatimids in Egypt, do not intend to forgive the slaughter of Jerusalem. They gather strength, preparing for retaliation. Yet the threat comes not only from outside, but from within. After the conquest, thousands of pilgrims begin to flow toward the Holy Land. They dream of seeing the Holy Sepulchre, of praying where Christ is believed to have walked. But their journey passes through lands far from safe. Caravans become easy targets. Bandits strike from the hills. Muslim raiding parties emerge from deserts and mountain passes. Travelers are robbed of gold and supplies, and sometimes slaughtered entirely. To leave Jerusalem without armed escort is almost certain death. The Crusaders attempt to impose order, but their strength is limited. Their army is small. Garrisons are scattered across vast territory. Each new knight arriving from Europe is often more mercenary than protector fighting for personal gain, not for the defense of the Holy Land. In 1119, 10 years after the capture of Jerusalem, a small group of knights led by Hugues de Payens presents an unusual proposal to King Baldwin II. They offer to guard the roads and protect pilgrims, not as hired soldiers or feudal vassals, but as monks who swear their loyalty to God alone. It is an unheard of idea. At the time, knighthood and monastic life exist in separate worlds. Monks renounce violence and wealth. Knights live by war and plunder. And yet here emerges something new. A monk with a sword. They vow to fight not for riches, but for faith. Baldwin supports the initiative and grants them quarters on the Temple Mount, within buildings near the former Al-Aqsa Mosque. According to tradition, this site stands atop the ruins of Solomon's Temple. From this place they take their name, the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Templars. In the beginning, they are truly poor. They possess no wealth, no powerful patrons. Legend tells that their early emblem depicts two knights sharing a single horse, a symbol of humility and poverty. They live on donations. They wear simple white cloaks. They follow strict discipline. Their mission is dangerous, patrolling roads, guarding pilgrims, fighting bandits and hostile forces. Yet behind their austerity stands a powerful idea: to be defenders of Christianity, to live by strict rule, and to fight not for themselves, but for God. Slowly, rumors of these knights reach Europe. Noble families begin to take notice. They see not merely warriors, but a new kind of Christian hero. In time, it becomes clear that the Templars do more than survive. They earn a reputation as the most effective defenders of the Holy Land. Still, their position remains uncertain. Without official recognition from the Church, their status is undefined. They are knights who serve no king, monks who belong to no traditional order. The answer arrives in 1129 at the Church Council of Troyes. Here, the Templars are officially recognized by the Catholic Church as a monastic military order. Their rule is written by Bernard of Clairvaux, a powerful theologian and one of the chief ideologues of the crusading movement. He presents the Templars as ideal knights of God, men who seek no earthly glory, but wage holy war in the name of faith. With recognition comes transformation. From now on, the Templars answer not to kings, but directly to the Pope. This grants them extraordinary privileges: independence from local laws, exemption from taxes, the right to build their own fortresses, and to collect donations throughout Europe. From this moment, the order grows rapidly. Noble knights join its ranks. Aristocratic families donate lands and wealth, believing this will cleanse their sins. The Pope himself supports the order as his personal army in the Holy Land. Life within the order follows strict rules, blending monastic asceticism with relentless military discipline. This fusion creates a warrior caste unlike any other of the time. Every Templar swears 3 core vows: chastity, poverty, and obedience. This means complete renunciation of personal life, property, and ambition. Upon entering the order, a knight abandons titles, lands, and inheritance. If married, he must leave his family forever. Castles and estates are surrendered to the order. From that moment on, his only family is his brothers. His only home, the fortresses and commanderies scattered across Europe and the Holy Land. Templar order is rigidly organized, with a hierarchy far more structured than feudal armies. Where ordinary knights serve individual lords, the Templars operate within a unified system governed by common laws. At the head stands the Grand Master. Elected for life, he holds near absolute authority. He commands armies, negotiates with kings, popes, and emperors. He declares wars, signs treaties, and governs both battlefield strategy and internal order. Below him, the Marshal serves as the chief military commander responsible for training, logistics, and tactics. The Seneschal oversees administration, finances, appointments, and the flow of resources. Commanders govern fortresses and lands, acting as military governors in the Holy Land and financial stewards in Europe. The knights themselves form the elite heavily armed cavalry, among the most disciplined and lethal warriors of the Middle Ages. But the order is not composed of knights alone. Sergeants, men of lower birth, make up a significant portion of the force. They serve as heavy infantry, manage estates, and sometimes command small units. Chaplains provide spiritual guidance, celebrate liturgies, and hear confessions. And finally, there are the Turcopoles light cavalry, recruited from local Eastern Christians. Not full members of the order, they nonetheless play a vital role, helping the Templars adapt to the fast-moving tactics of Muslim horsemen. And as the order grows in strength, discipline, and influence, something else begins to grow alongside it. A quiet unease, a sense that such power, bound by faith and secrecy, will one day demand a terrible price. All of this structure worked like a single, perfectly tuned mechanism, making the Order an incredibly effective organization. The life of a Templar was governed by a strict rule adopted in 1129, a rule that regulated every aspect of existence. It dictated how the brothers should dress, eat, sleep, train, and even how they should remain silent. The day began at dawn with quiet prayer, when the world was still wrapped in shadow and cool air. After that came breakfast, simple, humble food, bread, vegetables, beans, fish, and meat, no more than 3 times a week. Templars were forbidden to eat alone. Meals were taken together in complete silence, while sacred texts were read aloud, their words slowly filling the hall. After the meal came military training, every single day. The brothers trained in horseback riding, archery, and swordsmanship. Special attention was given to fighting in formation. The knights learned to attack as one body, to protect one another, to respond instantly to commands without hesitation. Discipline was absolute, yet life in the Order was not only about war. The Templars also cared for their horses, repaired weapons, studied maps, and copied documents. Many of them spoke several languages, as the Order maintained active negotiations with Byzantium, Arab states, and European monarchs. Knowledge, like steel, was a weapon. The vow of obedience held special importance. Unlike secular knights, who could refuse orders or abandon the battlefield, Templars had no right to personal choice. They were required to fight to the very end, even when the enemy outnumbered them. To leave the battle without command was considered treason, punishable by expulsion from the Order. It was this iron discipline, combined with the strict rule, that made them some of the most feared warriors of the Middle Ages. Where ordinary knights might waver or flee, Templars stood firm until the last man. Their organization, loyalty to brotherhood, and absolute devotion to their mission created an aura of invincibility around them. Every knightly order had its symbol, but the Templar Red Cross on a white cloak became one of the most recognizable emblems in history. At first, the brothers wore plain white garments with no insignia. This emphasized humility, rejection of personal ambition, and purity of spirit. White symbolized innocence and holiness, reminding all that the Templars were not ordinary knights, but monks who had devoted their lives to God. In 1147, Pope Eugene III officially granted the Order the right to wear the Red Cross, a symbol of martyrdom, sacrifice, and readiness to die for the faith. This mark transformed the Templars from mere warriors into God's chosen. In battle, the cross reminded them that death would not be in vain. They fought for a cause higher than any earthly goal. The shape of the cross could vary, straight, flared, or rounded, but it was always crimson, the color of blood shed for Christ, a vow never to retreat. To the Templars, death in battle was the greatest victory, for a fallen knight would immediately enter the kingdom of God. Unlike secular knights, who adorned their cloaks with coats of arms, gold, and fur, Templar clothing remained strictly ascetic. Personal symbols were forbidden so that no one stood above the others. This reinforced equality within the Order. On the battlefield, noble and commoner alike were one family. But this symbol was not only a sign of faith and devotion. Over time, it became a symbol of power. When European monarchs saw the Red Cross, they understood they were dealing with members of an organization that answered to no king, only to the Pope himself. At first, the Templars truly lived up to their name, the Poor Knights of Christ. They owned no personal property and held no private wealth. They survived on donations flowing in from across Christian Europe. Noble families, believing it their sacred duty to support the Holy Land, gifted the order lands, castles, money, and farmland. As the order's influence grew, so did its possessions. Yet the Templars did not merely collect gold, they knew how to manage it. Unlike secular lords who squandered fortunes on feasts and tournaments, the order used resources with strict calculation. Fortresses were built according to standardized designs. Grain was distributed in precisely measured amounts. Gold never lay idle. It was constantly put into circulation. Gradually, the order evolved into something unprecedented, a financial structure comparable to the first international bank. Their network of commanderies stretched across Europe, each one functioning as a vault, transit point, and financial center. One of their greatest innovations was the system of deposits and letters of credit. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land risked being robbed along the way. To avoid this, they could leave their money at a Templar house in Paris or London and receive a coded document. This document could then be presented in Acre or Jerusalem, where the pilgrim would receive the equivalent sum. In essence, the Templars invented the first traveler's checks, making journeys across the Mediterranean far safer. This system gave the order immense financial power. Funds held in trust could be invested in fortifications, weapons, ships, and supplies. Eventually, kings and noble families began borrowing from the order. The Templars lent colossal sums to monarchs, demanding guarantees in return, lands, privileges, and sometimes even political concessions. The Templars became a state within the crusading world. They possessed elite military forces, territories, garrisons, fleets, and a complex system of governance. Unlike kingdoms dependent on feudal loyalties, their power rested on discipline and carefully organized defense. Their greatest instruments of power were their fortresses, scattered across the Middle East. These outposts were nearly impregnable strongholds, protecting conquered lands, controlling trade routes, and ensuring strategic dominance. The order built castles designed to withstand both assault and siege. They rose atop cliffs, their walls merging with sheer rock faces. Inside, layered defenses turned each fortress into a multi-level killing ground. The most famous of them all was Crac des Chevaliers, the greatest crusader castle, located in modern Syria near Homs. This colossal fortress stood over 600 meters above sea level, commanding a full view of the surrounding lands. It guarded the vital route between Antioch and Tripoli, controlling the northern Crusader corridor. Crac des Chevaliers was a city fortress, housing a garrison of up to 2,000 warriors. Its outer walls, up to 3 meters thick, were sloped so enemy projectiles slid harmlessly downward. Behind them lay additional defensive layers, turning the castle into an unbreakable citadel. Inside were massive grain stores, water cisterns, armories, stables, living quarters, and even a church where knights prayed before battle. The fortress was considered invincible. Even Saladin's armies failed to breach it. Only in 1273 was it surrendered, after the defenders received a forged letter ordering them to abandon the stronghold. It was the only way Crac could fall. Another vital stronghold was at Lit, a coastal fortress south of modern Haifa. Its role was to protect pilgrims and maritime trade routes, linking the Holy Land with Europe. One of the largest Templar garrisons was stationed there, and its walls made it impregnable both by land and sea. Atlit became one of the last Christian strongholds in the region. Even after Acre fell, its garrison held on. Only when it became clear that no help would come from Europe did the last Templars abandon it, sailing away to Cyprus. Today, its ruins still whisper of the Order's former power. Another key fortress was Tortosa in modern Lebanon. Unlike many castles, it was never taken by assault. Positioned on the coast, it played a crucial role in the Templars' intelligence network. From here, they monitored Muslim troop movements and tracked trade routes between east and west. Tortosa remained in Templar hands even as the Crusader states fell one by one. With the expansion of their fortresses and lands, the Templars were no longer just a knightly order. They had become an independent political force. Their military bases, located not only in the Holy Land, but also across Europe, allowed the order to maintain complete independence from kings and feudal lords. No monarch could demand vassal service from them. They answered only to the Pope of Rome, and that meant they could pursue their own policies without seeking permission from local rulers. This made them dangerous players on the international stage. The order's system of governance resembled that of a centralized state. Their possessions were divided into provinces, each governed by a commander appointed by the Grand Master. Within these territories, the Templars collected taxes, controlled trade routes, managed agriculture, maintained garrisons, and strengthened fortifications. The order had its own laws, its own courts, and even its own diplomatic missions. They negotiated on equal footing with kings, formed alliances, and at times intervened in conflicts as an independent military force. Let us slowly turn to the battles where the order revealed its true military power. One of the most famous was the Battle of Montgisard, a clash in which only 500 knights and several thousand infantry defeated the vast army of Saladin. By the autumn of 1177, the Holy Land was swept by a new wave of war. From the south advanced the enormous army of Sultan Saladin, more than 26,000 warriors. This was not a collection of raiders or scattered feudal levies, but a disciplined war machine made up of elite Mamluks, light and heavy cavalry, archers, and infantry. Saladin intended to strike Ashkelon, a major coastal city through which the Kingdom of Jerusalem received its supplies. If Ashkelon fell, the road to the Holy City would lie open, and nothing would remain to stop the Muslim army. Jerusalem had no force capable of resisting such an advance. The fortresses held their garrisons, but they were scattered across the land. Many knights were far away, and some of the king's vassals showed no desire to join the campaign at all. The noble councils leaned toward sealing themselves behind walls and attempting to endure a siege. But King Baldwin chose a different path. He refused to wait for the blow. He did not hope the enemy would simply retreat. Instead, he decided to strike first, even though it seemed like pure madness. Young Baldwin, son of King Amalric, was only 16 years old, yet his fate had already been sealed. From childhood, he suffered from leprosy, a disease considered a death sentence in the Middle Ages. His hands and legs gradually lost sensation. His skin was covered with sores, and his face slowly became disfigured. An ordinary man with such a diagnosis would have been sent to a monastery or a leper house. But Baldwin was king. He could not flee from his destiny. Despite his illness, he not only retained power, he became a true warrior. He could sit firmly in the saddle, hold a sword, develop strategy, conduct negotiations, and most importantly, make decisions upon which the future of his kingdom depended. This time, his decision was clear: to gather everything he had and march to meet Saladin. Under his banner stood only 500 knights and several thousand infantry. Among them was a small but priceless force, around 80 Templars, battle-hardened warriors considered the elite of Christian arms. No one believed such a force could challenge Saladin. No one except Baldwin himself and his knights. Saladin did not expect resistance. His army advanced in a relaxed march, stretched across many kilometers. The Crusader forces appeared scattered, easy to destroy piece by piece. Enemy troops moved toward Ashkelon without urgency, setting up camps, stretching supply trains, with no rush to form battle lines. The Sultan was convinced there would be no major engagement. But Baldwin understood one thing: if he struck now, while the enemy was unformed and unprepared, he would have a chance. He led his army toward the hills overlooking the Muslim host. At that moment, the reliquary containing the true cross was brought forward, a sacred symbol believed to protect Christian lands. The warriors knelt, praying for divine aid, knowing that most of them would likely never leave this field alive. After a brief prayer, Baldwin gave the order to attack. The Templars advanced first. They formed a wedge, a sharp spearhead meant to split the enemy ranks. They did not hesitate. They did not lose formation. Their line moved like the tip of a lance, aimed directly at the heart of the opposing army. They crashed into the first Muslim lines, shattering formations, tearing open battle order, and spreading panic. Behind them followed the king's cavalry, sweeping away the remnants of the vanguard. Saladin tried to contain the assault, but his army had no time to form battle ranks. The forward units were already destroyed. Warriors in the center began to panic. Supply handlers and servants abandoned wagons and horses, fleeing from the advancing wall of steel. The Mamluks, masters of maneuver and flanking tactics, could not adapt in time. Against tightly packed formations advancing as one, the Crusaders gained a decisive advantage. The battle lasted the entire day. The Crusaders attacked in waves, exploiting surprise and the total confusion of their enemy. Their primary goal was simple: never allow the Muslim army to regroup into a single force. They achieved this through relentless assaults, allowing no pause, no breath, no recovery. They gave no rest to themselves, and none to their enemy. By evening, the battle was won. The remnants of Saladin's army fled. The Sultan himself narrowly escaped capture, leaving the field with only a small group of bodyguards. The Crusaders seized enormous spoils, weapons, supplies, and siege engines, but their greatest prize was victory. Montgisert became the triumph of Baldwin and his army. It was more than a battle. It was a blow that temporarily halted the Muslim advance into the Holy Land. It proved that discipline and strategy could defeat even a massive army when the enemy overestimated its strength. It was the victory of the Templars, who showed that their endurance, cold calculation in battle, and iron will could change the course of war. But the joy was short-lived. Baldwin knew he had won a battle, not the war. Saladin learned from his defeat. He would never make such a mistake again. He would return with a stronger, better prepared army. And next time, even the courage of the Templars would not save Jerusalem. King Baldwin died without leaving an heir. After several years of turmoil, the throne passed to Guy of Lusignan, a weak, impulsive man with little understanding of military strategy. Tensions grew within the kingdom. Some barons distrusted the new king, and the Templars, though still the main military force, could no longer hold the Holy Land on their own. Saladin took advantage of this. Over several years, he gradually weakened his enemies, launching raids, cutting fortresses off from supplies, and destroying trade routes. The Crusaders could only watch as their kingdom slowly shrank. Still, they hoped that a decisive battle might save them. That was exactly what Saladin wanted. He waited for them to leave their walls and walk into his trap. In early July 1187, his army invaded Galilee and laid siege to Tiberias. It was a provocation. The king could not abandon the city, but marching to relieve it meant near certain death. The Templars and experienced knights understood this. Under the burning July sun, without reliable water sources, such a march meant doom. At first, the Grand Master of the Templars, Gerard de Riedfort, opposed the campaign, but then he changed his mind. He believed the army could not sit idle while the enemy ravaged their lands. Other barons demanded battle. A fatal decision was made. The Crusader army, around 20,000 strong, marched out to meet Saladin in open field. They left Safria, where there was water, and headed toward Tiberias. Saladin had already calculated their route. He positioned his forces to cut them off from water. He knew thirst would kill faster than swords. The Crusaders moved slowly across the scorched plain beneath the relentless sun. Their water supplies dwindled. The nearest source was still hours away. That was when Saladin ordered his cavalry to attack. They did not engage in close combat. They harassed the Crusaders from a distance, firing arrows, circling, exhausting them, denying them rest, denying them progress. And the trap was closing. When night fell, the Crusaders found themselves trapped. They had no water. The men were exhausted, and the horses collapsed from dehydration. Their only hope was to break through to Lake Tiberias, but the road was blocked. By the morning of the next day, the Crusader army was surrounded. They took up defensive positions on two low hills near the place called Hattin, but even this could not save them. There was still no water. Dawn came on July 4th, 1187. Saladin ordered his warriors to set fire to the dry grass. Thick, scorching smoke rolled over the Crusader positions. Dehydrated, weakened, barely able to breathe, the men could no longer resist. When the Muslim army advanced, the balance of forces was hopelessly unequal. By midday, the battle was decided. King Guy was captured. Along with him, nearly all the great barons were taken prisoner. The Grand Master of the Templars, Gerard de Rydford, was also among the captives. But the greatest tragedy was yet to come. When the prisoners were brought before Saladin's tent, the Sultan ordered the execution of all Templars and Hospitallers. They were too dangerous to be left alive. One by one, they were beheaded, directly before the eyes of the king. Yet Gerard de Rydford escaped this fate. He did not go to his death as his brothers did. He waited humbly for his destiny and was soon released in exchange for the surrender of several Crusader fortresses. This became a stain upon his name. The Order of the Temple had always taken pride in the belief that its warriors preferred death to captivity, that no Templar surrendered without a fight. But their Grand Master not only surrendered, he used his position to save his own life at the cost of vital strongholds. Hattin was not merely a defeat. It was the collapse of the Crusader cause. Almost the entire army was destroyed. 3 months later, Muslim forces entered Jerusalem. The Templars lost their main stronghold, and their role in the Holy Land began to fade. Everything they had built over nearly a century crumbled in a single moment. From that point on, the once feared and powerful order became a group of survivors struggling to reclaim lost influence. By the end of the 13th century, the Christian states in the East were living out their final days. After the disaster at Hattin and the loss of Jerusalem, the Crusaders never truly recovered. Their once mighty kingdom shrank to a narrow strip of coastline, and fortresses and cities fell one after another. The monarchs of Europe no longer hurried to send armies to the Holy Land. The Crusades lost their former appeal, and papal calls for new expeditions increasingly met with indifference. In the East, meanwhile, Muslim rulers grew ever stronger. The last hope of the Christians was Acre, the capital of the weakened yet still surviving Kingdom of Jerusalem. This city, standing on the Mediterranean coast, was the key port and final citadel of the Crusaders. It remained a vital trade hub through which Eastern goods flowed to Europe, and in the opposite direction came knights, pilgrims, and supplies for the remaining garrisons. Here stood embassies of European states, merchant quarters, the headquarters of knightly orders, and the last combat-ready Crusader forces. If Acre fell, Christian power in the Holy Land would vanish forever. By 1290, it was clear that this moment was approaching. In the east rose the Sultan of Egypt, Al-Ashraf Halil, determined to finish what his predecessors had begun. He gathered a massive army, intending to destroy the Christian strongholds once and for all. In the spring of 1291, Muslim forces laid siege to Acre, beginning the final battle of the Crusades for the Holy Land. The Templars were among the city's main defenders. Their order, weakened by years of defeat, still preserved discipline and military skill. In Acre stood their powerful citadel, fortified, massive, nearly impregnable. Alongside them were the Hospitallers, Teutonic Knights, Genoese and Venetian mercenaries, and the remnants of the Kingdom of Jerusalem's army. Altogether, the garrison numbered around 10,000 warriors. The Muslim army reached the walls of Acre in early April. Their forces were vastly larger, around 200,000 men, including cavalry, infantry, and specialized sappers trained to destroy fortifications. They brought siege towers, trebuchets, battering rams, and mining teams had spent weeks tunneling beneath the walls. The Crusaders resisted desperately, but the attackers methodically shattered the city's defenses. Assaults followed one after another, leaving no time to rest. Crusader archers fired day and night from the towers, while knights launched sorties, trying to destroy the siege engines. But the enemy was too numerous. One by one, Acre's towers collapsed. By mid-May, it was clear the city was doomed. On May 19th, Muslim forces broke inside. A massacre began. The streets filled with fleeing civilians, burning buildings, and endless fighting. The Templars and Hospitallers held their ground to the last, but their numbers dwindled rapidly. When it became obvious that Acre could not be saved, the defenders withdrew into the final fortified districts. The Templars locked themselves inside their citadel, a massive fortress by the sea. It was the last Christian stronghold in the Holy Land. The Sultan offered them surrender. The Grand Master refused. The assault began. Fighting lasted for days, yet the walls of the citadel held firm. On May 28th, the Egyptians proposed a truce. According to the agreement, the surviving Templars would be allowed to leave the city by ship. But when the knights stepped out to discuss the terms, Muslim warriors attacked them. Those who failed to retreat in time were slaughtered. The next day, the remaining Templars sealed themselves inside the citadel once more and continued their defense. But this was the end. They had no strength left, no food, no hope of rescue. On May 25th, the last defenders were killed, and the fortress itself was destroyed. Thus ended the Christian history of the Holy Land. With the fall of Acre, the Crusaders lost their final eastern possessions. The Templars who survived the massacre fled to Cyprus. Their order still existed, but without the Holy Land, its mission had lost its meaning. Acre became the last great battle of the Crusades in the East. It marked the end of 2 centuries of Christian rule in the Holy Land and the end of an entire era. Their fortresses in the East were gone, yet in Europe they remained powerful, owning vast lands, immense wealth, and significant political influence. But as their military purpose faded, myths and mysteries began to grow around the order. One of the most enigmatic symbols later associated with the Templars was the Holy Grail. The legend of the Grail is one of the most mysterious and debated stories of the Middle Ages. But what was the Grail? Was it truly connected to the Templars, or merely a myth shaped by centuries? The origins of the Grail legend lie far beyond the order itself. The earliest references appear not in Templar records, but in Arthurian romances written in the 12th century. One of the first authors to write about the Grail was the French poet Chrétien de Troyes, who in his tale Percival, or the story of the Grail, described a mysterious vessel endowed with sacred power. In this early version, the Grail was not the cup of the Last Supper. It appeared instead as a magical object that bestowed grace and blessing. Later, in the works of Robert de Boron and Wolfram von Eschenbach, the legend transformed. The Grail became the holy cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper, and into which his blood was collected at the crucifixion. A connection emerged with early Christianity and secret brotherhoods, preserving sacred relics. But how did this story become linked to the Templars? Some researchers believe the Templars may have been guardians of the Grail. In the late Middle Ages, rumors spread that the order possessed special relics brought from Jerusalem. The connection was also symbolic. The Templars were seen not merely as warriors, but as secret keepers of Christian knowledge. Another layer of the legend came from the Cathars, a Christian movement persecuted by the Catholic Church. The Cathars were destroyed during the Albigensian Crusade, but before that they were known for their esoteric teachings and belief in hidden knowledge. Later theories claimed that the Cathars possessed the Grail, or another sacred relic, and that they entrusted it to the Templars before their destruction. Thus, the Grail shifted from a literary symbol into a mystical secret tied to the disappearance of the order as treasures. To this day, no proof exists that the Templars truly possessed such an object. Yet the legend, born from Arthurian myth, Gnostic ideas, and whispered rumors continues to fascinate. But while the Grail may remain a myth, the Templars' connection to the Temple of Solomon was entirely real. When the order was founded, its knights settled in the old temple complex on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They called themselves the Poor Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name chosen deliberately. For several years, when their numbers were still small, they did not fight battles or build castles. Their main purpose, it was believed, was the study of the temple ruins. Later, when the order suddenly gained power, rumors began to spread that the Templars had found something that changed their destiny forever. And it is here that the most forbidden questions begin to surface. One of the most popular theories claims that deep beneath the Temple Mount sacred relics of ancient Israel may have been hidden, relics that disappeared after the destruction of Jerusalem. Some believed that the Templars discovered the Ark of the Covenant, the greatest relic of the Old Testament, which contained the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. According to tradition, the Ark was concealed before the destruction of the First Temple, and its whereabouts remained a mystery ever since. Another version links the Templars to secret texts that could have revealed knowledge differing from official Christian doctrine. In the Middle Ages, rumors circulated that temple priests possessed occult knowledge later passed on to chosen initiates. If the Templars truly found ancient scrolls containing some hidden truth about the origins of Christianity, this could explain their later conflict with the papacy. Supporters of more radical theories believed that the order uncovered something so dangerous that the Church decided it had to be destroyed, perhaps information that challenged the very foundations of faith, or technologies far surpassing the level of medieval Europe. There is, however, a simpler explanation. The Templars may have found gold, jewels, or relics that they later used to strengthen their power. The order became extraordinarily wealthy in a very short time, and its financial influence grew with every decade. Perhaps the secret treasures so often spoken of were not mystical artifacts at all, but very real stores of gold discovered among the ruins of Jerusalem. Be that as it may, no evidence of such discoveries exists. We know that the Templars did indeed settle in the Temple of Solomon and carried out excavations there. We know that soon afterward they became powerful, but everything else is merely conjecture and legend that surrounded the order for centuries. Already in the Middle Ages, there were opinions that their power stemmed not from money, but from ancient knowledge acquired in the Holy Land. Their connection to the Temple of Solomon led many to suspect that the order had found something in Jerusalem far more valuable than gold or relics. These ideas were reinforced by rumors that the Templars maintained contact with Muslim and Jewish scholars, may have gained access to ancient manuscripts, and perhaps were even familiar with traditions rooted in the civilizations of ancient Egypt and Babylon. Centuries later, these assumptions merged with another idea, that the Templars may have been one of the first esoteric orders in Europe. As Masonic lodges spread across Europe in the 17th century, the belief emerged that lost Templar knowledge had been transmitted through them. The Freemasons revered the Temple of Solomon as a sacred symbol. Their rituals were connected to ancient building traditions, and the initiation process resembled the strict discipline of knightly orders. Some Masonic groups openly claimed descent from the Templars. By the 5th-10th century, Templar degrees began appearing in lodge statutes, allegedly tracing their origins back to the 10th century. But the legends did not stop with Freemasonry. In the 19th and 20th centuries, ideas emerged linking the Templars to alchemy. In the Middle Ages, alchemy was not merely the study of metals, but a system of secret knowledge encompassing the transformation of matter, immortality, and the search for the philosopher's stone. Rumors spread that the Templars possessed knowledge allowing them to create gold, use unknown technologies, or even alter human consciousness. Some sources claimed they had acquired this knowledge from Arab scholars, who at the time surpassed Europe in the natural sciences. Later, these theories expanded to include the notion that the order possessed lost texts containing ideas that did not align with canonical Christian teachings. During the Romantic era of the 19th century, numerous books portrayed the Templars as secret magicians initiated into the hidden laws of the universe. From a scientific perspective, none of these theories are supported by evidence. There is not a single reliable document linking the Templars to alchemy or Freemasonry, nor is there archaeological proof that manuscripts were discovered beneath the Temple of Solomon. The Templars were indeed wealthy and powerful, but their secret lay not in occult knowledge, but in their ability to manage resources, conduct military campaigns, and build administrative structures. All later theories about them emerged centuries after the Order's destruction and became part of a mythology that transformed a military brotherhood into a symbol of global mystery. By the beginning of the 14th century, the Order of the Temple remained one of the most influential organizations in Europe. They had lost the Holy Land, but not their wealth or power. Their commanderies were spread across Western Europe. They owned lands, castles, ports, and even trade routes. They controlled banking operations and issued loans to kings. The Templars did not answer to any monarch. Their only protector was the Pope, which made them independent even of the most powerful rulers. But such independence bred resentment. In France, where the Order held particularly strong influence, the Templars gained a deadly enemy, King Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair. Philip ascended the throne in 1285 and almost immediately faced severe difficulties. His reign was marked by constant wars that required enormous expenditures. He fought England, attempted to seize Flanders, struggled for control over Navarre, and clashed with the papacy itself. All of this demanded immense financial resources, and the royal treasury was emptying. Traditional methods of raising funds no longer worked. Taxes imposed by the king caused unrest among nobles and merchants. He even resorted to expelling Jews and confiscating their property, yet even this proved insufficient. Loans from the Templars became his only solution. For many years, the Order had conducted financial operations, issuing loans to monarchs, nobles, and major merchants. They safeguarded the funds of European rulers in their fortresses, controlled transfers between states, and ensured the security of major transactions. Philip IV borrowed vast sums from them, but over time it became clear that he would never be able to repay the debt. At that moment, a dangerous idea took shape. If he could not repay the creditor, it would be better to destroy the creditor. But money was not the only reason for his hatred of the Templars. In Europe, Philip sought to establish absolute royal authority, and the Order stood in his way. The Templars were too powerful and too independent. Their fortresses across France functioned as a state within a state, beyond royal control. Their financial operations extended beyond the monarchy, and most importantly, they answered only to the Pope. This was unacceptable to Philip. He was already fighting for control over the Church, and had effectively brought the papacy under his influence. In 1303, he secured the election of a new pope, Clement V, who owed his position to the French crown. The king assumed he would now be able to subjugate the Templars as well, but the Order refused to become part of the French monarchy. Thus, by the beginning of 1307, Philip arrived at a single conclusion: the Order had to disappear. In doing so, he would solve two problems at once: eliminate his debts and remove a dangerous political rival. But destroying such a powerful organization was not simple. If the king openly declared war, the Templars could retreat to their fortresses and mount resistance. He needed a pretext that would make their destruction lawful, and soon he found it. The date was approaching, October 13th, 1307, the day the Order would cease to exist. By the autumn of 1307, the Templars did not yet suspect that their days of power were numbered. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was in Paris at the king's invitation, confident that the Order's position remained secure. The Templars still owned lands, fortresses, and immense financial resources. Pope Clement V, despite pressure from the French court, was in no hurry to condemn the Order. But Philip IV had already made his decision. He knew the order could not simply be stripped of power. A declaration of war would allow them to retreat into their fortresses and possibly rise in rebellion. Instead, the king chose a different tactic, a lightning strike that would catch the Templars completely off guard. Philip prepared the operation in advance. Secret orders were sent to royal officials weeks before the attack, sealed and forbidden to be opened until the appointed date. On the night of October 13th, 1307, thousands of royal soldiers moved across France with orders to arrest all members of the order simultaneously. The Templars did not expect the blow. They were convinced they remained under papal protection and never considered strengthening their defenses. In a single night, the order lost its leaders, its treasury, its command structure, and all communication between its garrisons. In Paris, Jacques de Molay himself, along with other leaders of the order, was captured. They were arrested without resistance, under the pretext that it was a personal order from the Pope. The royal troops seized the Templars' main treasury, yet the greatest treasures of the order vanished. By the morning of October 14th, all France knew that the once invincible Templars had fallen in a single night. But the arrests were only the beginning. The king now needed to prove that the order truly deserved annihilation. Philip could not simply declare that he had destroyed the Templars for their wealth. To justify the mass arrests, he needed something that would portray the order as enemies of Christendom. At that time, the gravest crimes were considered heresy, witchcraft, and betrayal of the Christian faith. These were precisely the accusations leveled against the Templars. First, royal investigators claimed that the order practiced secret rituals contrary to the Catholic Church. Under torture, the arrested Templars began confessing that at secret gatherings they spat on the cross, renounced Christ, and worshipped a demonic idol known as Baphomet. One of the most enigmatic charges against the Templars was their alleged worship of Baphomet. Investigators claimed the order kept a strange head to which they offered secret sacrifices. Some confessions described it as a skull, others as a bearded statue, and still others as an image of a demon with a goat's head. But what did this name mean? Before the trial of the Templars, it had never appeared in Christian documents. Some historians believe that the word Baphomet could have been a corruption of the name Muhammad, suggesting contact with Muslims. Others suggest it was an occult symbol invented in later centuries. Regardless, there is no real evidence that the Templars ever worshipped Baphomet. Another key accusation was that new recruits, upon initiation, spat on the cross and renounced Christ. According to investigators, this ritual was meant to prove their loyalty to the order, even if it required turning away from the faith. In reality, there are no mentions of this prior to 1307. Most likely, the accusation arose simply because investigators needed evidence that the order had secretly turned from the church. Finally, there were shocking allegations of sinful practices, including homosexual acts, among the knights. During interrogations, Templars were made to confess that, during initiation, they had to kiss each other on the lips, navel, and buttocks, allegedly symbolizing total submission to the order. Historians are convinced that this accusation was entirely fabricated. In the Middle Ages, homosexual relations were considered mortal sins, and such claims served to tarnish the order's reputation in the eyes of the people. But the order did not surrender without a fight. Many knights refused to admit heresy, asserting that all accusations were false. This was inconvenient for the king. He could not allow the Templars to speak before the public and the church to deny the charges. Hence, a wave of torture began, aimed at breaking the knights' will and forcing them to utter the required words. The French Inquisition already had extensive experience with brutal interrogation techniques. The Templars became victims of the most horrifying medieval tortures, endured by only a few. They were hung by their arms, had their joints broken, their skin burned, and were stretched on racks. Some went weeks without water or food, kept in complete darkness. The punishments were designed not to kill, but to break the spirit. Under such cruelty, confessions began to emerge. Knights, driven to the brink of death, agreed to affirm any accusation simply to end the suffering. They signed documents confessing renunciation of Christ, worship of Baphomet, and participation in secret rites. Yet, as soon as some Templars were temporarily released from prison, they immediately recanted, declaring that they had been forced to lie under torture. This placed the Inquisition in a difficult position. They either had to torture the prisoners again or sentence them to death immediately. For Philip IV, it was crucial not just to obtain confessions, but to erase the order from memory. Thus, in 1312, Pope Clement V, who had until then tried to remain neutral, was forced to yield to the king's pressure and officially dissolve the order. This marked the end of the Templars as an organization, but the king could not allow the former leaders to simply disappear. They were to face one final trial. When the Templars first rose to prominence, they were led by great commanders. During the order's golden age, its masters were diplomats and politicians. But the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, entered history for a different reason. He became a victim, a symbol, and a curse to his enemies. Jacques de Molay, who led the order at the turn of the 14th century, was not an adventurer or a reformer. He believed in the Templars as a brotherhood of warriors faithful to the Church. When the arrests began, he could not believe that popes and bishops would turn away from the order. Even when thrown into prison, he hoped the Church would intervene and save him. But the Church remained silent. For 7 years, he was kept in confinement, interrogated, and forced to sign confessions. Finally, in 1314, he was brought to the square in front of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris to hear his sentence. By the king's plan, de Molay was to admit guilt and publicly repent. Instead, he refused all his confessions, loudly declaring that the Templars were innocent and had been destroyed unjustly. This was a challenge the king could not ignore. On the following day, March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay and his associates were burned at the stake on the Isle de Sight. According to legend, as the flames consumed his body, he pronounced a curse on his chief enemies, Pope Clement and King Philip. "Before the year is out, you shall face God's judgment." These words may have been added later, but a remarkable fact remains. Both of his enemies indeed died within a year of the Grand Master's execution. Pope Clement V died on April 20, 1314, only a month after de Molay's death. Contemporary accounts described him as suffering a painful illness and consumed by fear before his death. Philip IV died in November of the same year from a mysterious illness that struck suddenly. Some claimed he wasted away in torment. These coincidences fueled the legend of the Templar curse. In the following years, Philip IV's dynasty quickly died out, and France was plunged into the chaos of the 100 Years' War. From a scientific perspective, there is no proof that Jacques de Molay actually pronounced a curse. The first mentions of it appeared decades after his execution. Nevertheless, the fact remains. His enemies indeed died shortly after his death. Thus ended the Order of the Templars. Their organization was destroyed, and its legacy erased. Yet their story did not disappear. On the contrary, with each passing century, it grew ever more mysterious, transforming the destroyed order into a symbol of secret knowledge, conspiracies, and mystical powers. After the order's destruction, it seemed that its influence would vanish forever. The Templars were branded heretics, their lands handed over to other organizations, their commanders executed, and their symbols and traditions consigned to oblivion. But history had other plans. The longer the years passed, the deeper their mark on the world became. They did not simply fade into the past. They became part of the most enduring and captivating legends of the Middle Ages. Central question that still fascinates historians and enthusiasts today: did the Templars truly vanish without a trace? Some researchers believe that the order was not completely destroyed and that its legacy continued in unexpected forms. One of the most enduring theories claims that some knights escaped arrest and fled to regions that would later become Switzerland. Within a few decades, military communities appeared in that area, noted for strict discipline and unusual organization. These groups, known as Swiss mercenaries, became famous for resisting monarchs and operating as independent brotherhoods, where each soldier received a share of profits rather than serving a king or noble. At the same time, the first banking structures arose in Switzerland, known for secrecy in protecting deposits and independence from royal authority. This led to speculation that the Templars may have laid the foundations of the future financial system, applying their experience in money management. There is, however, no direct evidence that the Knights actually took refuge in Switzerland. It remains a beautiful theory. Yet the idea that the Templars continued their existence under a new guise has never lost its appeal. More than 7 centuries have passed since the Order's destruction, yet their name has not faded from history. On the contrary, the further the Templar era recedes into the past, the more they are transformed into something beyond mere knights. In the 19th century, Romantics wrote of them as victims of conspiracy, and by the 20th century, they became a symbol of secret knowledge inaccessible to ordinary mortals. They were associated with the quest for the Holy Grail, ancient mystical traditions, Freemasonry, and secret societies ruling the world. Their image permeated literature, cinema, and video games, becoming one of the great enigmas of world history. In popular culture, the Templars appear alternately as guardians of sacred knowledge or conspirators seeking global domination. Films such as Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, books like The Da Vinci Code, and games such as Assassin's Creed have given new life to the legend of the Order's struggle against secret societies. But why have they become the focus of so many myths? Perhaps because their disappearance was too sudden and mysterious. Their arrests happened in a single night. Their wealth was never recovered, and their trail in history ended abruptly. All of this created the sense that something greater lay behind the official version. If the myths are set aside, their true legacy lies not in conspiracy or mystical knowledge, but in the principles they developed and passed on to the world. Their experience in financial operations, the creation of systems for money transfers and lending, principles of military discipline, and the chivalric code. All of this became part of the development of European civilization. Though they no longer exist as an organization, their name lives on in the symbols, traditions, and cultural phenomena they left behind. They began as warrior monks, but their legacy extended far beyond knighthood. They became a symbol of secret knowledge, power, and authority, and their story remains one of the most mysterious chapters of the Middle Ages. Our story today comes to an end. Thank you for traveling with us through the centuries, wandering with knights in the silence of stone temples and the shadows of forgotten faith. Every listen, every comment, every kind word is a small flame that warms us in this night. Thank you for your trust, attention, and the quiet in which these stories come alive. Now, let there be peace. May your sleep be as deep as the dungeons of the temples, and as bright as a candle in a monastery cell. Close your eyes. Good night, my dear friends. Until the next lecture,